Welcome back to Strategic Solutions. Today, we're going to be talking about how you can support your employees and your applicants with invisible disabilities under the American with Disabilities Act. Our last podcast was a real-life scenario with a potential applicant who understood they had a disability, was proactive enough to identify themselves, self-identify what accommodations they might need without even knowing what the job was, which is pretty fascinating and pretty respectful and proactive. So as HR, what is our job when we get faced with something like this? And in this case, it was an invisible disability. So today, we're talking about invisible disabilities, the ones that can be characterized as chronic pain, mental health conditions, maybe neurological challenges, and many others which affect millions of employees. And these are often misunderstood, overlooked in the workplace because they're not noticeable. And it is very often that the employee or the applicant themselves has done a very effective job choosing to mask their own disability because it has caused them challenges in the past, or because they know that it's not a challenge and though they're not self-disclosing. But remember that if somebody doesn't self-disclose a disability, unless it's required by the state or federal or county or contract or some other requirement that they must disclose that they have a disability, who gets to make that decision about whether I fit into that category? And if you're not giving them a definition of what disability means, and if you're using the ADA definition at the national level, oh my goodness, or you're trying to use the California definition, which, by the way, the attorneys don't even want you to get it, what the real definition of the disability is in a medical certificate to accommodate or put them into the adaptive process, which you can do, by the way. But of course, who says what a disability is? A disability is something that is medically impacting one of your major life functions. And in California, that includes working. But we're talking about a major life function. So then who's going to define that? The medical assistant at the employee's office? So this is a really misunderstood area on your employment applications. I'm confident it's a misunderstood area as a required notification. So the federal government or a government agency can says that they've hired so many percentage of the people with disabilities. It doesn't matter that you don't have to self-disclose if you don't want to. Nobody's going to tell you later you should have, because you may not even know you have a disability. So take a breath, because what I just said, it was really significant to me, because the employee that spoke to me said, I didn't even realize I had a disability until I thought was starting to impact other issues because they changed positions. Okay. On the other hand, you may not notice somebody has a disability because it's invisible and you can't see it. And we know that we want people to self-disclose if they have a disability that impacts their ability to perform the functions of the job, the essential functions. That's their job to do that. But if they don't think their disability impacts their ability to perform their job and they don't self-disclose, but then they end up having performance challenges, and it is a disability that impacts their ability to perform, the fact they didn't self-disclose at the time that you hired them and filled out that application and told them they were supposed to tell you all this stuff does not change your responsibility to engage in the interactive process under the ADA in every state in the United States. So be very, very aware of that. So let's talk about this a little bit, those hidden disabilities. So what we're doing today is review how those come into your workplace, or acknowledgement or knowledge of them, how the ADA might apply to them, and some of the common challenges employees are facing, and the actionable steps you as an employer should be taking to make sure you provide support. So if you haven't listened to the last podcast, take a minute and trying to listen to that first, if you get a chance, or after this one, because this was really a response to that question that I got. Somebody contacted me on the phone, and it was really impactful for me because I know this is a very prevalent issue for many of you, and you're not even quite sure how to handle it. We're really getting confident about handling physical disabilities. They're getting easier for everybody. Some of you have some challenges with them, but everybody's getting a little bit more aware of that. But these hidden disabilities are a little more challenging. So whatever the disability is that you are notified of, or that you're notified an employee has a medical issue that is impacting their ability to perform the essential functions of their job, and you're confirming with a medical certificate that the doctor said they have a disability, even if it don't tell you what it is, make sure the doctor has the definition of the disability clarification and they are checking that box that this employee has a disability. Okay, they have a disability. We start there. Now, what is a qualified individual with a disability? Well, first they have to have a disability. That's why somebody has to check that box for us. We don't just have the employee say, well, I've got this issue and I need you to help me. Now, let me take that back. Of course, we respond to that, but that's not the American with Disabilities Act, everybody. That's you being a good HR proactive person, making sure your employees are comfortable to do their job in the workplace. That's different than the American with Disabilities Act. The American with Disabilities Act requires the employee to actually have a disability, which means you need to know that they do and that somebody has said they do. And so what we have done is created a form that actually defines disability at the federal level. And if you're in a state that is more specific, we include that for your state. But what you'll want to do is the same thing and make sure that the employee understands they need to discuss this with their doctor, and their doctor needs to check that box on the medical certificate that I understand my patient has a disability under the ADA. I'm okay with that, but I need somebody to tell me objectively that this employee has a disability besides it coming out of just their mouth. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just don't want to be ignorant about whether they actually have a disability or not that meets the criteria under the American with Disabilities Act, including in the state of California, everybody. So they've got a disability. Now, are they a qualified individual? Well, you're only a qualified individual with a disability in the workplace, people. We're just talking about the workplace today. We're not talking about criminal justice or rental opportunities or access to public entities. We're talking about the workplace. You're only a qualified individual with a disability in the workplace if you can perform all the essential functions of your job, unless you're pregnant. The Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act allows you to get an accommodation for just the functions you can perform, and then potentially get leave as an accommodation, or FEMLA if you're eligible for ones you can't. Of course, if any of that is an undue hardship, like any other ADA issue, you don't accommodate and you move on to your next policies. But if you're not pregnant and this is a hidden disability that may actually be exacerbated with a pregnancy, so let's not leave that out of the discussion. We have a hidden disability that we don't know about. Then we became informed about it, either because a coworker complained about a behavior or the employee confirmed that they realized they were having challenges. Maybe it was brought to them in their performance, doesn't matter. And now they're bringing it up. So number one strategy, everybody, is you do not say, well, why didn't you tell me? Because they didn't tell you, they didn't know enough about the job yet. They didn't know enough about the environment or the challenges of maybe their coworkers or the workflow process. There could be a lot of reasons why a hidden disability isn't disclosed initially, and you're not aware that it exists until they actually have challenges with performing their functions of the job, their essential functions. And frankly, that's what we're here for, because when they identify that they do, we want to get that department manager to pull back and let us step in and identify with the employee with a good faith interactive meeting that is very well developed and identified and a process confirmed. And we do it the same way, whether they're a physical disability or mental, potentially with a voc rehab person at this point, because now we're getting into very challenging things. And remember, voc rehab consultants who are trained in this arena understand the issues of mental and cognitive disabilities much more than HR has ever been exposed to. So they have some real value in this area. And so when we're doing this good faith interactive meeting, what we're doing is we're saying, what about this function? How does it work for you? Are you having challenges with interacting with your coworkers? Is it the noise in the room? Is it the speed with which you're required to get it done? You, employee, now have a very clear 100% responsibility to now let me know, how does your disability impact your ability to perform this function? Because we can't do that. We're not capable of answering that question. Only employee knows what that answer is. We know if it doesn't work. That's our job too. Encouraging an employee to self-disclose and then have to be able to even answer these questions can be tough. And that's why the medical provider, which is very inadequate at this point, they have a medical assistants filling that out. The medical industry is understaffed, and they have low-level people that are not trained to understand this stuff, actually trying to do this for us. And so if we're not getting the information we need, and I don't care what the organization is, some of the biggest medical organizations in the country do not have the resources to actually provide us the information that we're asking for. So we are training our employees to ask the right questions, but we are asking them that question irregardless of anything else they understood or misunderstood. How does your disability impact your ability to handle complex customer service challenges when the customers are yelling and screaming at you, for example, and everything in between? Look at the job you're talking about. So when you get to the issue of, are they a qualified individual with a disability, it absolutely includes the performance expectations of the job. So if an employee can't perform with their disability, and they're really not performing, they're impacting results, it's called potential harm to self and others. That's really harm. That's physical or real significant harm. But you could have potential harm to clients in your business. That means that they shouldn't be in the environment and you're going to be putting them on leave. This is typically going to be unpaid, everybody, unless there's a state benefit or you have long-term or STD or they had PTO. It's going to be unpaid because they're not working, and they're trying to get the answer to, how does their disability impact their ability to perform their job? The challenge that we've discovered with hidden disabilities, and certainly some of the very challenging cognitive disabilities, is the length of time it takes the employee to get the answer to that question. That's not their fault. We've got a challenge in the medical industry right now. But that doesn't mean as an organization we're required to keep that job open till they can figure it out. And I know that sounds horrible, but we're organizations that function and produce. And we've got other employees that can be impacted that have to work overtime or have to compensate, and we're not getting the information we need. We have contracts that are impacted, money that's being impacted. This can be operationally impacted. Those are all the undue hardship issues. And that's a separate kind of discussion that we do on the strategic solutions. But for you, the challenge is, how does their disability impact? And if they can't tell you that, they can't tell you what the actual restrictions are. And what they're looking for is extended time and extended time and extended time and extended time to get that answer. Well, we don't get that. We have to act in good faith. Under HR, HR industry standards of care, we are responding immediately. Maybe that day if there's potential harm. But certainly within days and weeks, we're resolving these issues, not months, everybody, not months. When you're getting into 3, 4, 5, 6 months, the only reason I would know I'd be able to do that without an undue hardship is that the job was easily replaceable, a plug in, plug out, that I didn't need that depth of knowledge, because how could you operate without depth of knowledge for up to 6 months? If you have a functionality that needs to produce and meet the expectations of your clients. These are all the operational undue hardships that can be impacted. So what we are really encouraging employees out there, if you're listening to this, and we're speaking to you too, and we're going to try and make sure we're speaking you too, don't be a victim. You're your own victim. If you're a victim, be a proactive person in your own life. Get HR what they need, so when they need it, you got it. Meaning you already know that you may have a challenge, so get to the medical provider, start getting those appointments scheduled, and get the answers to the questions that you're starting to run into about what your functionality may or may not be. And if you've got previous performance appraisals, look at what they've said to you and what has been impacted repetitively, maybe with multiple employers, or other people have informed you of, that you should pay attention to. And this is your opportunity. No different, everybody, than if you've got a physical disability. If you've got a leg, a back, a femur, a shoulder, a finger, a wrist, especially as we get older, because we may be some of the primary people in the workforce, we need to walk in with knowledge of ourselves. And when we have that good faith interactive meeting as an HR specialist in this area, I'm expecting, and I'm training, and I'm coaching, and I'm assisting the employee with everything I just talked about, so they are empowered to take on that challenge, to understand how their disability impacts their ability to perform our job in our workplace, in our environment, with our work schedule, with our demands, with our employees who work there and the customers that we're servicing. Because if they're unable to do that and we're unable to find a way to accommodate them, they're not a qualified individual with a disability. And that goes for all parts of this. So when you're talking about disorders like anxiety disorders, fibromyalgia, ADHD, PTSD, even diabetes, many of these are conditions that are just not visible. And maybe even the employee is not aware of them. And that's why when you've got a great employee or someone who's been really met the expectations of the job, maybe not the gold star, but they've been there and they did their job, and they start having challenges, this could be a hidden disability that they're not even aware of. And this is when our job as the proactive advocate for our employees really kicks in. We should be letting the supervisor know, wait a minute. Have they not been a great employee for you? Have they been a performer for months, for years? And now they're not. Okay, let's take a look at that. What is that? Why don't you have them come and talk to me? And then what we're doing is we're sitting down and saying, there's been some performance challenges and you've always had a solid record of performance. So I wanted to know, is there anything impacting your ability to do the functions of your job? Is there something I can help you with? Now, stepping into the ADA and asking people if they're disabled is not okay either, but letting them know there was this comment made, there was this statement made, there was this concern brought up, and you're not saying comment, statement, it's really more this challenge was identified is the verbiage we want to use. We're very, very neutral and flat affect when we do this because we're trying to be as we don't want to be part of any issue. We want to just be the facilitator to help the employee feel confident that they can tell us what they need because we're here to help them. And if we can't, we need to be honest and tell them that too, that this job doesn't sound like it's going to work out. We can't find an accommodation, or we're not identifying why you have a performance challenge and you haven't given us any other information. But if it's an accommodation issue and we can't accommodate, we're looking at any other job in the company. And when you're talking about somebody with a cognitive disability or even physical, cognitive first, you may be doing a demotion, which is really emotionally impacting. So you need to look at that with them and speak to them with that because the alternative might be they get terminated. With a back injury or physical injury, it could mean that they're not necessarily demoted, but they're losing opportunities for the overtime because they can't work that often. And so it impacts their overall earning capacity. And they would love to be promoted to the team leader or the coordinator, but that's not required. So it's a very challenging position to be in. We're there to be proactive on both sides and discuss the employer's obligations under the ADA, which is identifying whether we can accommodate through a very timely good faith interactive meeting and really trying to find a solution. However, if the employee never provides their restrictions, we can only mitigate what they can provide. And if they can only work part-time, well, we don't do part-time accommodations under the ADA. You need to be able to perform all the essential functions of the job at a meets expectations level. And if the essential functions don't meet a full-time job, well, you might be talking to the manager and restructuring those jobs as a different solution. But if you're trying to do a light duty or modified duty, that's not ADA, folks. That sounds more like workers' comp or a personnel policy. Don't call it ADA. Don't even deal with the ADA. Somehow you've got another policy that says we're going to give this employee 3 months or 6 months to do something else. And then if they get done with that and still can't do it, then we're going to try and accommodate them under the ADA. And then we're going to say it's an undue hardship to keep this job open. Well, it may have been an undue hardship when you originally came up with the light duty and modified duty. That's not ADA. So if you don't have policies to have light duty and modified duty, written policies or union contracts, I'd question why those are happening. And are those informal? Are your supervisors doing that without you knowing and calling it accommodation? Because then it gets difficult. So we want employees to know not to be informally accommodated by supervisors, but to know when they're not doing their job for a hidden disability or ones that we noticed that we thought they'd be okay with. Because if they can't, it's our job to mitigate that. And if we can't, now it's really our job, because our job is also to be proactive for the employer and make sure they've got employees who are being effective and operational and getting the job done. So if it creates an undue hardship, we can't accommodate you. How do you start the accommodation process? You understand that there is an accommodation necessary because they inform us. We engage in the interactive process. We get the medical restrictions from a medical provider that confirms whatever employee told us that we might have been able to temporarily accommodate until we got those medical documents, which I'd want to have within a couple of weeks, a couple of months at the most. Unless it's an undue hardship, you may not be able to have them out of that job for 3 weeks. Every organization is different. What is the impact of not having them do that job? That's the real undue hardship assessment. Disabilities under the ADA are not always visible. I want to really express the importance of the interactive process, interacting with HR, getting voc rehab involved if it's more complex that you've been involved before. What is the employee's responsibilities? Really taking the time to help them understand that they are the ones that have to answer the question, how does your disability impact your ability to perform the essential functions of the job? That's the question we need the answer to. And without getting that answer, we can't even continue to engage. So let's really emphasize the need for confidentiality. Make sure the employee knows that we do not discuss their disability with the supervisors, nor should they. Employees should not be discussing it with other employees, but if they choose to, we can't stop you. We absolutely protect your privacy, and we only discuss your restrictions and how we help you with the supervisor and with anybody else, because it is a need to know issue. It is highly confidential. If we're going to get involved with the doctor's office, we're signing HIPAA notes with the employee first. If we're talking to anybody outside of our immediate ADA accommodation team, the importance of not discriminating against somebody with an unknown disability is really significant and challenging right now, because how do you know when to step in and how do you know what to say? But we just never assume anything, and we always act in good faith, and we start with, can I help you? Get to Ask Jan. Ask Jan has been around for over 30 years now. You can talk to them about these very challenging cognitive disabilities, and they've got the best questions for you to ask during the good faith meetings, so you can just sort of bring it up in a lower key way. You want to talk to them about the ADA accommodation analysis and how we do that and what we're looking for from your medical provider. So we're educating them. Our job is to be proactive for the employee, to make sure we've done everything to help them be able to do their job. And our job is also to be proactive for the department manager and the organization to make sure if there's anybody who can't do the functions of their job at a meets expectation level, they're not getting excessive leave after they've exhausted FEMLA, because we haven't implemented a solid, very clear, interactive medical leave and accommodation management system. And really, that's what our membership is all about. It's always been about. We've got lots of trainings that you can download. We've got the documentations and the checklists and the medical certificates that ask these real significant questions that support you while you're trying to engage in the interactive process. So let me know how I can help you. And in closing, I want to remind you that invisible disabilities are real, they're impactful, they're protected under the ADA, but the employee really has to start the process, because if we approach them inappropriately, then we're perceiving them as being disabled. We have to watch the managers, because they are expecting performance, and then when it stops, they don't understand, and so they're getting frustrated and maybe be responding inappropriately. Or there may be other reasons that they just aren't able to step in and get the employee to us right away. So we have to be available and open and let the employees know we're here. That's our job, is to help them. And it starts with understanding empathy and a proactive approach to accommodations. So if you're an employer and HR responsible for taking care of the integrated medical leaves and accommodations in your organization, check us out. We're here to help. Let us help you make a significant difference and supporting the employees in your workplace that have disabilities. They are your best employees, and boy, do they want to work for you. So look out for new episodes every other Friday. We're around, and send us your questions because we will answer your scenarios here. That's what we're here for. We want to find out what are you really having challenges with? Take care. Have a good 2025. Bye.